brilliant.
Oh, that was amazing.
It's genuinely brilliant. Like, you should ask them to send that to you.
I
Um,
know.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. I'm Catriona Ward. I write books, including The Last House on Needless Street, and most recently, Looking Glass Sound. I'm very impressive, but I don't have time to tell you all that. More importantly, we are here with Mona Awad, who is genuinely one of the writers who, when I read her books, I think, I wish I'd written that. She gives me writer's envy. She's a Renaissance woman, a woman for all seasons, I think, 4 novels to date.
Mhm.
Winner, finalist for the New England Book Award, teaching writing as well, and more awards than you could throw at her head, basically. Um, and I think she's been the darling of Time and Vogue and the New York Public Library, best book of 2019, which is Bunny. What was my personal favorite, as I know it must be for many people. We're so excited. I'm so excited to talk to you. I have too many questions, so I'm just going to start, if that's
Okay.
all right. But
Yeah.
if you would, could you possibly locate us in time and place by giving us a short reading?
Yes, I would love to. And it's such a thrill to be in conversation with you. I started reading Looking Glass Sound, and I just think it's so brilliant. So it's just a total honor. And thank you all so much for coming. So this novel is, I call it a Gothic fairy tale about beauty, envy, and grief. And it's about a woman who gets sucked into this very sinister, lavish beauty cult. And so I'm just going to read a scene in which she's kind of in the labyrinth already. I'm in some sort of dark red waiting room, heavy with the scent of eucalyptus, mirrors all around. Bon voyage, the woman in silver said, and then she was gone. She took my clothes and my shoes and my purse with her, left me standing here barefoot in a white and red robe. I hear a waterfall somewhere, the distant sound of chimes. Some red magazines, looks like, on a black marble table. Beside them, a vase full of what looks like raspberries. Also, chilled water jugs filled with, what is it, blood vessels? Pomegranate seeds. Get a grip, I tell myself. A little nervous, I guess. Why a little nervous? When they've been nothing but kind. Just a spa. Just a free treatment. How many times have I sat at the dress shop looking up pictures of the fanciest spas on my phone, wishing I could walk through those gilded gates and walk out again, lifted and glowing and reborn, thinking the secret is just behind those gates. Secret to what? Something essential. And now I'm here, within the gates, in the waiting room. Better, much better than my Montreal spa's waiting room with its dated copies of Elle and its cheap paper cups of weak tea. I go there twice a year, which is the most I can afford. Twice a year, a woman in a white smock takes me into a darkened cubicle and electrocutes my face. I taste metal in my teeth for weeks after, but it's worth it for that slightly lifted look. After the electrocution, she calls it microcurrent, she coats my still spasming skin with marine algae. I lie there under the cold black sea goop for as long as she'll let me, dreaming of luminosity, how I'll soon glow in the dark. What the fuck did you do to your face? Mother would say when we FaceTimed afterward. Nothing, I'd say. Liar, she'd say. You did something. Tell me. Don't I have a lifted look? You have a scared look, like you've been stunned. Well, maybe next time I visit you, I can go where you go. She got silent then, waved her hand as if to wave my words away. You don't want to go where I go. I've told you. You don't need any of this stuff. That Egyptian blood saves you. I'm another story. Well, now I'm here, Mother. I've gone where you go. Maybe I'm not another story after all. And I'll stop there.
And that's such an utterly brilliant passage to pick, I think, because it isolates almost every one of these teeming themes that kind of run through the book. Where to start? I'm so interested in the way you do that thin line between wellness, mental wellness, and mental unwellness.
Yes.
It's that's a horror novel in itself, really. Um, I mean, talk us, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I feel like we're just a breath away from it all the time. I mean, that's kind of what I find so fascinating about horror is that it's not so far away. It's all it is just a contemplation of the place that we occupy in the universe and the fact that we, occupy a perception that is often wildly inaccurate. You know what I mean?
I
And
do, I do. Yeah, it's
yeah.
almost like cosmic, it's almost like a kind of mental cosmic horror.
Yes, yes,
But yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So I just feel like it's really for me, it's about tuning into a consciousness
yeah,
and really committing myself to being with it moment to moment. And when I commit to that, to like just being inside of a consciousness as they're moving through something, it very quickly starts going into the surreal,
yeah,
going into the darker spaces, because that is where we go in our minds all the time, you
yeah.
know?
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's almost no, you do this thing so well where you wear the characters, the reader is forced into the character and almost to wear them like a skin, um, which is an act of horror in itself,
Yes,
almost.
it's true.
There's such an element of non-consent about it, which is, you're forced to experience things very closely that
Yes.
you don't want to. It's utterly brilliant. I mean, I'm a huge fan of your writing. I have been for many years. I knew you before all everyone else discovered you. I just think you're wonderful. But I mean, so you're on. This is book 4, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So I think looking at the trajectory of your novels, there are through lines and there are kind of concerns that are carried from one to the other. Um, and they're kind of in conversation with each other in a way. Um, do you feel like the books talk to each other and there's sort of almost a memory of one left, like that carries forward to the next one?
I think so. I mean, I think the idea of kind of careful what you wish for has always been something that is really fascinating to me, just because I think I started my reading life with fairy tales. And that is a huge narrative preoccupation of fairy tales. For very sinister reasons. Be
And
careful what
you
you
studied,
desire.
yeah, exactly. And you studied fairy tales as well, didn't you? You
Yeah,
did,
I
yeah, that's
did.
part of them, yeah.
Yeah, I did. And I love them so, so much. And they really did they informed Bunny, the whole transformation from animal to human, from human to animal. I love those transformation stories so much. And I love those outsider narratives so much. And fairy tales are very often stories of outsiders, people who are vulnerable, who are powerless, who, through this kind of wish fulfillment narrative, get to experience agency and power and a claiming of their desire, but it's usually at some kind of cost.
Yeah,
And I'm interested in that. And I think Rouge is very interested in that,
yeah.
and this idea of cost for transformation. But it's in All's Well too, and it's in Bunny. Yeah, I love a transformation story. It's probably one of my favorite narrative arcs.
I feel like each novel sort of transforms into the next as you move along.
Yeah.
But I think it's so rich with fairy tale references and with archetypes. It's absolutely wonderful. And as you say, like fairy tales often sort of dispense justice and like kind of redemptive narratives. Sometimes they don't.
I know.
They are they can be probably the most misogynistic and regressive forms of storytelling we have. But I love how you subvert that. So how do you take something that is sometimes um inherently against one's principles and turn it into something that works for us?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I mean, I think a lot about Hans Christian Andersen's stories, which on the surface, even those can read
Yeah.
very misogynistic and stuff. But if you think about his own place in the world, which was a very powerless, vulnerable place, his own longing for change, his own longing to ascend in terms of class, social status. The stories start to take on a different kind of meaning. And I think part of it was his approach to fairy tales, which is very modern, is to occupy the characters' consciousness, their actual skin, to get inside them instead of trying to look on top of them. So The Little Mermaid is such a haunting fairy tale because we feel like we are truly with the Little Mermaid. We're not observing her from this bird's eye view. We're inside her body as she's going through this narrative of desire and longing and fear. And I think that's what I take, is that kind of approach to the storytelling, to sort of occupy a character within the narrative. And then it really changes, I think, its meaning and the way that it's received, even though it's very sinister, very, very often in terms of the outcome.
It's such an excellent sleight of hand, that, because it smuggles in actually quite progressive principles under the guise of presenting as a traditional,
Yes.
Anyway, back to you. We could talk a bit. So could you tell us a bit about Belle? Tell us a bit about her journey. With no spoilers, obviously.
Yes, of course. So Belle is the protagonist of Rouge, and she is a dress shop clerk, a very lonely woman, and she is very addicted to skincare videos, to beauty videos on YouTube. She watches a particular YouTube personality named Dr. Marva. So she's already very vulnerable to that world of the beauty industry, basically. And her mother, at the start of the book, mysteriously dies, her very beautiful mother. And she has to go back to California to sort of settle her affairs. And as a result of going back home, she ends up getting lured into this cult. She's already so vulnerable to the message, and it turns out, and this is not a spoiler, that her mother too, obviously had a fondness, a weakness for all things beauty, and may well have been involved in this cult.
I love the fact that there is a villain in this novel,
Yeah.
and it's not a person. It's a thing.
Yeah.
The cult, the sort of the fetishization of beauty.
Yeah.
You do it so well, and you come out feeling slightly changed by this book, because you realize how deeply it penetrates into everything you do. So what sort of, is this something, I know this is something that travels through your books, I know it is, but this seems a particularly focused, very direct kind of examination of it. What drew you to that?
My own obsession with skincare videos.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Which was just so intense
Yeah.
that it started to feel kind of dark. And so I felt like I wanted to examine what was underneath it, because clearly any obsession with the surface is, a result of something that is brewing beneath the surface. And you're only a breath away when you're talking about all things beauty. You're a breath away from horror, which I felt like instinctively.
That's right.
And I think it has to do with the fact that horror is ultimately it is about evoking a sense of wonder, at least at first. I mean, and so I got kind of drawn into that aspect of horror, the fact that it likes to cast a spell, which is what beauty does. There's just so much crossover. And I've always been interested in Snow White, the fairy tale Snow White. And that also felt very tied to the whole world of beauty. There's such like a fairy tale element to the beauty industry's promise of transformation, promise of impossible things. So I think it was that. It was kind of my obsession with Snow White on the one hand, and then my obsession with these skincare videos, and how I realized, oh my gosh, it's all one story. Yeah.
That's kind of the genius of the book, as it marries these very old kind of received ideas of fairy tales and mythology to our modern mythologies seamlessly. There's so much to say about it. So like Snow White is the inert, like she's the object, and
Yes.
that's kind of her function. That's all she does. I love what you do this, but I'd also like to direct your attention to another mythical figure who appears with great frequency, which is Tom Cruise.
Yes, Tom Cruise.
Can you we talk a little bit about Tom Cruise in this novel? Because I feel like I've never known him better in a way.
Yes, yes. It's kind of strange. I mean, he showed up by accident, like all good things. As I was writing, just showed up. And so, you know, I've kind of learned as a writer, and I don't know, I'm sure this happens with you, but I'd be very curious to hear. Um, those things that you kind of stumble on as you're working, or you encounter, and then you decide, okay, this is strange, but I'm going to keep it and see where it leads me for now. And that's what happened. I just kind of decided to keep him. And then it turned out that, of course, it made perfect narrative sense to keep him there.
Yeah.
So I did. And it was a total joy. You
I
know,
hope he reads it.
I hope he reads it
I
too.
hope
I
he
mean,
reads
and
it,
you
yeah.
know, and this, I don't think this is a spoiler to say, but ultimately it is not Tom Cruise. So hopefully he reads it and
Yeah.
it's fine.
He'll be relieved to know, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's wonderful that in such a it's a hugely female-focused novel, mothers and daughters. It's heart-wrenching and you know quite, which I love, unsentimentalized depiction of these relationships, which are so often made pretty and
Yeah.
acceptable. I loved what you did with the mother and daughter there. And so the mother's she has this obsession with old films. There's so many references that run through this like a weft. Um,
Yes.
the one that it made me really think of was Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Oh, yeah. I love that movie so much. It's so good. Betty Davis. Oh,
And it is horror. It's horror. For
it's
sure.
total horror.
Bit
It's,
of
yeah,
horror. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And the dynamics between the two of them are just so dark and
Yeah.
yeah, wonderful. But yeah, I watched so many old movies as I was working on Rouge.
Okay.
I really draw a lot from cinema, just the narrative structures of it. And those old movies are just, they're just so beautifully structured. They're kind of like fairy tales in a lot of ways.
I think that's really astute. And you've got a film. I believe that Bunny's in development at the moment. But
Yes, yes. It's being developed by Bad Robot Productions, which I'm very excited about, as they seem to really, really understand it and really, really passionate about it. So we'll see where it all leads. But it would be great to see Bunny as a film. Just again, that was another novel that's really drawn from movies, from 80s movies, especially 80s like girl clique movies, you know.
but again, it recenters itself all the time on female relationships and you know toxic or benign or you know good or bad. That's what I like about your books is there's no need to sanitize or make it nice, which
Yeah.
is great. You know, why shouldn't we have the right to be villains?
That's right.
And,
That's right.
mm,
I agree.
and
Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, please.
Oh, I was just going to say the idea that a villain is more than one is like I've always been interested in that, like the plurality of the villain, especially in horror.
Mm.
That's the one thing I love about horror is it's never the threat is never one thing. It's always multiple things, which is what makes it horror. It's surrounds you, you know, there's no way to beat it. It's like it's a system, you know. And so that I really took a lot of inspiration from that for Rouge because the villain it's multiple, you know. She encounters so many embodiments of it, but it's also just it's a system that she is inside of, that we're all inside of.
So
Yes.
interesting because like that is the duality of horror. So it comes from the exterior, from you know the systematic and institutionalized aspects of things, but it also comes from inside in a
Yes.
way. Like what
Yes.
we fear more than the monster is becoming the monster.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
beauty becoming the beast.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So many protagonists in horror are also the antagonists. They're the villains of horror as well. And that is so utterly compelling to me. It feels honest, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to bleed onto the page for that sort of story because
Yes.
you have to write your own fear. This is great because obviously horror is my hobby horse. So I I think horror has to be ultimately rooted in empathy. Has to be, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
all about relating. I mean, how can you reach through the page and give the reader a handful of fear if you
Right.
yourself are not terrified? So
Yes.
did you, and this book frightened me. I found it very frightening. That's not that easy to do. Were you did you feel moments of fear while writing it?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. They were my favorite parts,
Yeah.
because when I was afraid, I always ask my students because I teach a class in horror i- at Syracuse, and I always ask them like, what's holding hands with your fear? When you're feeling fear, what else are you feeling as you're moving through the story?
Mm,
There has to be something else. It can't just be fear.
mm.
And so when I was feeling fear in those moments, I was also feeling, tenderness, yeah, maybe even love. Uh,
Grief, yeah.
yeah, grief, absolutely
Yeah,
grief.
yeah.
Enchantment, so many things going on at once. And so they were really some of the most potent moments in the story for me. But yes, I always feel like the story is coming alive for me if I am also.
Suffering.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
That's it. It has to cost you, right?
Yes,
That,
it has to
yeah,
cost.
it has to
Absolutely.
cost you. I think, I mean, I feel, it cost me. So I can't imagine what it cost you. I want to talk about, okay, I don't know about you, but I cannot open any one of my novels without spotting on the page at least 78,000 mistakes that I've
Yes,
made.
yes.
But just very occasionally, I spot a line that goes, "Oh, I'm so glad I wrote that. That's
Yes.
wonderful." Is there something you can, is there one of those in Rouge that reaches out to you?
Yeah, yeah, actually. It's a scene. I don't know if I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a scene in Rouge where the mirror figure, I won't reveal who it is, but the mirror figure is talking to Belle about what beauty is.
Mm,
And it's I'm so happy that I wrote that sequence.
that's what.
Um, yeah, I don't know that I'll be able to find it, but it's like it makes me so happy.
I'm absolutely outraged that you don't have it memorized. Um, there was a line in a review which I loved about this book, which I thought was, it sort of captured it. I think it didn't quite capture the whole, the breadth of it, but it's from The Guardian, which is Rouge provokes the befuddled headiness you get from inhaling nail polish remover.
Mm.
It's it's a little, it's quite gendered,
Yeah.
perhaps a
Yeah.
little like, looking, but in the hierarchy of genre, horror is obviously, it's the unloved, sort of stepchild. Um,
Right.
but I think that's what part of its power is
Yes.
it embraces and sort of represents otherness, which
Yes.
is its power. Um, I think it's absolutely wonderful. Okay, I've got so much to ask you, but I think, okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and I think we have to turn to questions because you guys all you didn't come to hear me talk, you came to hear wonderful Mona. So I think I'd like to ask about, it's a bit personal. I think I'd like to ask about how you filter yourself into these books, um,
Mm.
because you have to. So how does it work to give so much of yourself, but also maintain, well, your sanity?
Yeah, I don't maintain it. When
Oh,
I'm
that's,
writing. Yeah, I don't maintain it. It's gone. I give it all over. It usually does begin for me. The moment of inspiration usually starts with a moment of powerlessness that I do experience in the world that is
right.
profound, that like leaves me without speech or with any defenses. And I'm just like floored by it. And then that will just plant a seed, a dark seed, if you will. And then eventually like an idea will kind of take shape or a narrative will take shape around it. And then that's how I find the language for it is through a novel. And it becomes a completely different thing, but it starts with this moment that I felt in my soul. So naturally, there's going to be a lot of bleeding of my own experience and feelings and
Yeah.
onto the page. And it's very, very difficult for me because of the way I work, because it's very immersive.
Mhm.
Um, it's very difficult for me to create a separation. Um,
You have to write in a way, you have to write yourself to escape the book. You have to
yes,
write yourself out of the book.
yes, yes. And then the hardest thing is when it's over and it leaves me and I feel it leaving me and then I really feel very empty and sad.
Yeah. Yeah. I often spend, sure we shouldn't be saying these things honestly, but who cares? I often spend at least 3 weeks of writing the new book, just writing the old book, but just with new character names. It's like,
Yes.
oh, it's just, I can't let it go.
I know you can't let it go. You were in that world for so long. It's
Yeah.
so hard to leave it. Yeah.
Yeah, you made these people. You are, it's a bit grandiose, but you're, and you pay for it, but you are a god, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's sort of, it fosters a slightly unhealthy mental attitude.
Yes.
So, um, it it also, I think, there's people say you read to find yourself, don't they? But you also obviously read to lose yourself,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's a delicate alchemy, which I think you captured so beautifully. I couldn't go on enough about how scalpel like your prose is, and how well you convey relationships. I think anyone, guys, whoever's watching, if you haven't got this book, please, it's very special. It is a tour de force, as they say in the biz. Um, I'm going to go to the questions from the audience because I think that I want to try and make sure we get everyone included. Okay, so the products and procedures described in the book were hilarious. I agree. Are you a cosmetics junkie? And this is from Stephanie Pearl. Beautiful name.
Yeah. I am a junkie. I did kind of have a bit of an awakening as I was working on it because I was so enchanted by these YouTube personalities when I first started, and I just was like so excited by this whole world of beauty. And I'm not saying that I'm not still vulnerable to it, and I'm not still because I am. I totally am. I had to write a piece about my addiction for a Canadian journal last year, and I thought I was totally over it. And the minute I started writing about it and just kind of watched the videos again, I started buying products that I couldn't afford again and going
Wow.
through the whole thing again. So I am not not over it by any means. But I have learned that there are just certain products that are really I can really rely on, and that maybe sometimes less is more. And so I'm a junkie, but I'm also like, you know, I feel like I've learned something. I don't know. Some days I think I've learned nothing.
I think that's the strongest sign of having grown,
Yeah.
knowing what you don't know. I think I find that really fascinating how, as someone who is so expressive with the written word, there's this vulnerable place in you
Yeah.
that receives this visual stimulus and responds so strongly to it. Um, okay, so Laurie Johnson says, how do you pace yourself while writing a new novel? And what does your writing schedule typically look like? Don't tell the truth about this, by the way. No one should.
Well, I often, because I teach during the year, I tend to use my summers and my winter breaks in a really intensive way. And so I will try to generate a whole draft in one stretch. And then I'll use the school year to revise slowly. But I don't even like to, I like to just completely lose myself in it. I have playlists and everything else. And I work in the morning. And I usually will go for as long as I can go. So sometimes that's hours and hours. Sometimes it's not very long at all. Um, until I'm finished. But I'm a morning writer for sure. Yeah.
It's good when you haven't sort of been touched by the world yet. So
Yes,
you're
exactly.
unspoiled. You could just straight from the other universe where that is that we go to in sleep. Um, because I mean this book is a fever dream, right?
Yeah.
It is a nightmarish fever dream of 21st century womanhood.
Yes. Yes.
Um, I mean, I love it, but I mean, I'm frightened of it, and I'm frightened of you. Uh, and leading on to this very neatly, I'm so good at this. Albina Abina Miles says, "What was your hardest scene to write in Rouge, and why?"
Oh, wow.
It's a good question.
That is a good question. I think there were some moments where a lot of pieces were kind of coming together, and those were trickier scenes.
Right.
Mm, The balance of how much to tell and how much to withhold, it's always like a very difficult dance, especially in a novel that has these elements of the surreal and
Mm,
there's a lot of ambiguity and mystery, and you just don't know how and when to necessarily reveal everything. So there were a couple of conversations with Hud Hudson,
mm, mm,
the kind of I won't say who he is just in case there are people who haven't read it.
mm,
But he's a very important figure in the book. He's sort of an enigmatic figure who is affiliated with Rouge, with this cult, but she doesn't really know how. They have some dialogues where I had to really balance and be careful about how much is left unsaid and how much is suggested, and that was a little tricky. But I did love. I mean, I loved being in those scenes. It was just challenging, you know.
It's just sort of like the now kind of ubiquitous, unreliable narrator. Um,
Yes.
but it's really hard to do well, like really
Yes.
do it well.
Yes.
Because you have to dream your own dream, which is the novel, and you have to also dream with the reader and just pick out
Yes.
moments where
Yes.
they know exactly what you need them to know. It's
Exactly.
really difficult. It's like your left brain and your right brain thinking together.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. No, I know. It's very challenging.
It's wonderful. Okay, so let's have yes, okay, so Lauren Brown says, do you have any writing craft tips? Like how did you develop your writing style?
Um, you know, yeah, I feel like I just kind of followed what excited me. So I love dialogue. I love theater. I've always loved it.
Okay.
So I took a lot of my love of dialogue and just being in a scene from that world.
Did you
Um,
act or were you an actor?
I did act when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah, in high school. I was really, really into theater. And then, you know, I really do love a first person narrator who openly discloses, and that might even come from theater, that kind of character who is
Yeah.
disclosed openly to the audience. I just love that kind of figure
Mm.
uh, in theater. And so I love a narrator who can do that in a way that makes me believe them. So
Wrongly.
yeah. And so even if they are, you know, not reliable, which none of us are, of course. And so yeah, so I think that first person just really, really embodying a character that I can feel is sort of how I get into it.
Mm,
And then it's just like permission to fail, you know. I was so terrified when I went from 13 Ways to Bunny. 13 Ways is my first book. Bunny is my second book, and that book has elements of the surreal. 13 Ways stays in kind of a realistic world. And so the jump was really frightening. And I did not think I had every indication that it was not going to sell, and
mm,
you know,
mm,
but even sort of fearing that and having some initial evidence of that just from the people that I gave it to read at first was
mm,
actually very liberating because I still wanted to tell that story. I still wanted to be with that book. And being with that book and thinking that it had no future was truly one of the most exciting things that I've ever done creatively. And
wow.
I take that energy with me now into every book because it's what works. Is just that idea that, well, you know, I might be working on something that will never see the light of day, but that's okay because I'm interested. You know, this story and this world and these people in it are alive to me. So I'm gonna stay.
I love that. I'm, I'm finding this very relatable. When we took the last house on Needle Street out to publishers, I think we had for about I think 5 weeks what we called Rejection Monday, where my agent would send me all the rejection letters from all
Oh
the
God.
publishers. And the good thing in a way was they were all different. Like if they're
Right.
all the same, you're like, ooh. But luckily
Yeah.
everybody hated something different. So that's good. Um, I genuinely, I was with my agent and we were walking in the rain down a really grey street in London, and I was just like, are we gonna? Is this just a madman's dream? This just
Yeah.
lunacy? And she said, look, if we don't sell it, we don't sell it. That's fine. Doesn't matter. We'll go to the next one. And my heart just broke. I was like, bloody hell! You mean after all this work and this sort of like, needle, like delicately threading the story together might not sell. But she was right. But genuinely, we thought we wouldn't sell it.
Yeah.
I think, but you're so right. You have to hold on to that energy,
Yes.
like
Yes.
ride or die. Write
Yeah.
as if you're fighting a monster.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. It's that dance like nobody's watching sort of energy.
It is, but with
Yeah.
more fighting.
Yes, with more fighting.
Um, I mean, okay, so okay, right. What do you love most about the world of mystery and suspense and darkness? And this is from Bridget DeWald.
Thank you for that question, Bridget.
Great question.
What do I love the most about it? Well, I mean, I love anything mysterious is going to draw me in, and I do think that that is probably from just my first experiences of reading, very very much in that realm. It was all fantasy,
Mm,
children's fantasies like The
mm,
Wizard of Oz, like Alice in Wonderland, like fairy tales.
mm,
I just love the idea of of the possibility of the unknown, of magic, of what you don't expect. And I love tension so much in a story. I mean, it's what gives a story life, really, I think. It's what makes it feel like there's something at stake, It's the thing that brings us into a story. And so I think I've just always been drawn to tension just because it has so much narrative energy. It has
yeah.
so much life. Yeah.
That's such an amazing description of that dynamic. Like horror is just basically taking what you love and making it hurt you.
Yes, yes, it's
Yeah,
so true. I mean,
it
that is
is.
essentially it. She loves beauty and beauty hurts her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But what was wonderful about this is you took your the thing that you loved and made it hurt you by writing it. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. I don't know how you do this because it's such a personal book without doing what I call an emotional vomit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you have to be careful about that. I mean, and I'm always careful about that. I try to be because I like to give myself a container in the form of a plot
Oh.
in
Yes,
which to
plot
put.
is your best friend. I think
Yes.
that's it. Yeah, characters, plot, everything is plot. Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree. And I mean, I started off as kind of a confessional poet, and it was just
Wow. Yeah.
emotional vomit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many brilliant poets, and I love poetry so much, but my experience of it is what it did is it kind of lit me up to wanna I have this stuff and it's like really, really important to me.
Yeah.
I need to find the right shape for it. And
Vehicle. Yeah, yeah.
that was it was stories. It was for sure fiction.
Wonderful. When I first started, I used to treat it like a seance. So
Yeah, I love that.
I had a day job, and so
Right.
at night I'd light a candle and sit like, by the laptop, just waiting for the muse to visit, which is
Yes.
probably not the way to do it, guys.
Oh, I
Um,
love the ritualistic aspect.
uh, so maybe it's a good way to start, but the thing is,
Yeah.
if the muse doesn't visit, go seek her out.
No.
It's a
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, um, so right, let's have one more. Let's have another question from this very very intelligent audience. I think. Well done,
Yeah.
you guys. You're being amazing. Don't you think?
Yeah,
I
I totally think
yeah.
so. These are
Um.
great questions.
So um. Speaking about horror, which is, I think, runs really like a deep vein, which I love that you acknowledge that because I feel like horror so often gets like pulled down to the lowest rung in the hierarchy. And because we don't trust literature of the body, we don't trust comedy because it makes us laugh. We don't
Yes.
trust like romance or erotica because it makes us feel. We don't
Yes.
trust horror because it makes us afraid. We only like the stuff that starts here.
Yes. You're so right about that. And I think you've just like articulated the thing that I've just always wondered. What is it about comedy and horror that people just don't?
It's embarrassing. It's
It's
embarrassing to be
embarrassing.
it's embarrassing to be made to laugh by something outside
Yeah.
yourself or to feel fear. It's
Yeah.
childish. It's not
Yeah.
good enough. Yeah.
I
It's
think you're so right. You
and
have less control over your feelings about it. It's because
exactly.
it's in your body. You're so right.
That's it. And books are supposed to be about the head and the
Yes.
cerebral stuff that only, there's all these witty comments and, I don't know, wonderful literary novels in which, look, I mean, there are wonderful literary novels, but sometimes it takes them 40 pages to cross a room, and it's things that just don't even right there. Sorry, I digress. You are clearly a horror person, which I love. So, what are your biggest influences? And this is a question from Catherine Goldberg.
Biggest influences.
Yeah.
Hmm. They really, really run the gamut. I do love Shirley Jackson.
Course.
She's amazing. And I love The Haunting of Hill House. I still teach it every term because I love it so much.
I mean, my first question is how, but yeah.
I know it's a difficult one because there's just so much going on and it's so beautiful. But it's that idea that you were talking about earlier about how the threat is both external and internal. That's such a beautiful example in a novel of exactly that relationship between the dangers of the internal and the external kind of coming together, and then there's no boundary between them.
There's no resolution. You cannot, yeah. The
Exactly.
two things can't exist together. And
Yes.
that's the terrifying moment in that book. So for those who haven't read it, there's, I'm going to spoil the ending of The Haunting of Hill House. I feel like it's been published for quite a long time. There's a moment where the protagonist is driving towards her certain death, and she thinks, "Why didn't anyone stop me?"
I know.
That's kind of, it's very terrifying. Why didn't anyone stop her? They're all standing there just watching it happen. Sorry, but your horror influences.
No, I think you're right. It's such a terrifying moment in the novel. No, she's great, and I love the kind of fever dreamy style. I love the kind of very immersive sort of narration that she likes to do. There's just so many things about Shirley Jackson's writing that light me up. And similarly, I love Bret Easton Ellis. I loved very recently The Shards, which is probably my favorite of his books. But I loved American Psycho when I was younger, and I think part of the reason I loved it is because it did that thing that horror likes to do, and that I just love when certain novels do this, is there's no escape from this character's consciousness. You are with this person.
Imprisoned, yeah.
Yeah, and that is just so exciting to
But
me.
that's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So I think, yeah, Bret Easton Ellis, fairy tales, and I love film too. Film is a big influence. I love movies like Rosemary's Baby.
Right.
I love Kubrick, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, kind of all over the place. I love theater,
Yeah.
Shakespeare. Yeah.
Well, Shakespeare's the most brutal of them all in some ways. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I actually came to him very late.
Yeah.
And he's, the novels are what inspired my third book, All's Well.
Oh,
And
cool.
and yeah, but just the way that what I love about Shakespeare is that there's just so much room to imagine. There's so much room for the audience, for the
Yeah.
reader to sort of imagine the meaning. And I love that openness in his plays. So I try to keep that in my own work, that kind of openness.
And that sort of that gothic binary of imprisonment and openness.
Yes,
Mm.
exactly.
Speaking of the gothic, I think your books are so gothic, and I think Rouge in particular hits this very specific, like gothic sweet spot. And it's wonderful because I'm going to assume you agree.
Yes.
No, I would obviously, but I think the Gothic actually has a huge amount to say to our times. It's about power, gender, coercion, imprisonment and freedom and landscape. And I mean, this book is there's a sort of Scarlet Letter sort of thread running through it as well, isn't there? It's got this. Yeah, it's got this very, it's so elusive. There are so many references to so many wonderful things that sorry, hard to keep track, but sorry, one by one. The Gothic. Talk us through your Gothic impulses.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think it started for me as a teenager. I was completely, a huge fan of that world, just musically and just in terms of the aesthetic, in terms of the writers. I just loved all things Gothic. And I think the reason I loved it is sort of what you were talking about with horror and comedy. Um, it's beautiful. There's this romanticization of the melancholy of fear. of beauty, of all things beautiful. But there's also this lovely, like, kind of element of camp running through it all. Like, it doesn't take itself
It's
entirely
big.
serious.
Yeah, it's big. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the thing about the Gothic that I love the most, is that it makes room for perspective. It kind of laughs a little bit at the dark. Um, and I think that's the right way to be about it, you
I
know?
think that's perfectly put. It's got like, because it's so connected to the sublime, the romantic ideal of the sublime, which is sort of like transcendental. But yeah, because what is the difference sometimes in your body between ecstasy and fear? Like
Yes.
the same signals are being sent all the time. Um, yes. So we were talking about the Gothic and also like your other influences, because this is just basically for me. I just want to know what feeds into this brain so I can steal it.
Yes. So more influences of the
Yeah.
Gothic.
Oh no,
Um,
from any kind.
any
Like,
kind.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love Jean Rhys. I actually think there's a lot of Gothic elements to her work too. Just, I mean,
To-
just
Totally. Yeah. The White Sox Associates. Yeah.
very Gothic, right? It takes the mad woman in the attic from Jane Eyre and gives her her own story. But the thing I love about Jean Rhys the most is that it's like the novels, they're not they may not be structurally perfect or I mean, I don't even know what that means, but
Yeah.
the thing that is exciting about her is that all the narrators feel so alive. It really does feel like that person's soul is on the page. And I fell in love with that, and I read all of her books, and I still go back to them to this day, and I feel like she's like whispering in my ear. It's my favorite experience as a reader
Wonderful.
of that kind of narrator. So
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. I'm very jealous. I wish she'd whisper to me. I'm going to ask a question from Hargrove, which
yeah.
is, what books did you read as a child?
As a child, so I read a lot of fairy tales.
Yeah.
I read Alice in Wonderland, which was a favorite.
Terrifying.
Yes, it was. And then, it's really funny. I mean, my mother loved, um, she loved Agatha Christie. She loved, you know, Judith Krantz and Sidney Sheldon. And so I read all of those, and I was completely like this. It was a massive fan of Rage of Angels. I thought it was the best thing I ever read. And I loved Judith Krantz. I just and I think those writers are still with me because I kind of love they're really over the top. And and I I have like a lot of fondness in my heart for that.
Yeah.
Um for kind of the over the top narrative.
I
Um,
I love that you say that because I think you can see that in this book in particular. It's not only has it got like it's not only a searing indictment of contemporary mores, but it's a classic mystery.
yeah.
It's I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I ripped out my headphones. Um, it's a classic mystery. It's like I feel, there's structurally like Agatha Christie and Sidney Sheldon, all these like there's a real purity and simplicity to that mechanism. And I feel it's operating because all the time she's caught in a mystery.
Yeah.
Um, so the kind of reader playing detective at the same time.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I do think I got that from those books and from that
Yeah.
early reading. They were really the first adult fiction books that I read. They were mysteries and I read a lot of just like I mean they were very, very like romantic too. There's a lot of elements of
So, yeah,
romance and eroticism in those
yeah,
flowers in the attic, you
yeah.
know. Yeah.
It's like romance and mystery, and I think crime often have this wonderful reassurance of the inevitable resolution.
Yeah.
You know where the story's going. It's the problem is soluble.
Yes.
You're not alone in the universe. There's
That's
someone
right.
so who will there's justice.
Yes.
Um, which is what horror lacks, which I love.
Oh, I
No
love. I
justice.
was just going to say that. That's the thing about horror that I love is that it's open-ended at the end. You are stuck with the
Yeah,
threat still being out there, and that's wonderful. I kind of love that.
I
But
love
as
it too.
a child, I like
So we're all alone. We're alone in the universe. We're all,
right.
yeah, just on the edge of nothing. Um, I mean, so, your settings are very kind of hyper realistic, but also somehow incredibly married to magical realism.
Yeah.
It's a genre bend, which I really applaud you for. So in terms of like magical realism and things like that, do you have any forebears that you would particularly take inspiration from?
Yeah, I do take inspiration from Shirley Jackson,
Right.
but I do also take inspiration somebody more contemporary, but I take a lot of inspiration from David Mitchell's handling of
Wonderful. Yeah.
surreal, just because he always maintains that it feels very visceral. It feels very I can see it. Sensory details are perfect. They make it feel like it's real, and I believe it, even if it is very unreal. And so I've kind of really held on to that the voice is the way from the realistic to the less realistic universe. A realistic voice will be the portal, will be the bridge that connects them. In fact, it's usually the way into it for me. The voice will actually lead me to the surreal because I'm in that consciousness.
Yeah. I think that's really wise thing to say, because the thing about consciousness is we have no idea what it's like to be in another person's mind. The
Yes.
closest thing we have is a book.
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
you're so right. That's exactly right.
so crucial. But you're sort of channeling, and the reader is like channeling your channeling. There's no way that any of us can know for sure what this really is.
Yeah.
But and we create this sort of empathic experience. Um, I also got a hint, as well as David Mitchell, I thought there was like a touch of the Isabel Allende, maybe. Which I
I've
thought was
only I,
really
yeah, I've only read House of Spirits, which was a little while ago, but yes, I can see that for sure. And that magical realism, absolutely. Gabrielle
and
Gar
a bit of Kelly Link,
Oh
maybe.
yeah, I love Kelly Link.
Kelly
I'll never forget the bookseller at Elliott Bay who gave her collection to me. I read it and
Which,
then I ran her
which
book.
one?
It was called Stranger Things Happen. It's her first one.
Ah, yeah, yeah. So I found her at Magic for Beginners.
Oh, nice
Mm.
one.
I think you and she do a similar thing in that you make the real world seem imaginary.
Yeah.
The truth is in the book, which is a very disorientating experience, and it's not kind to the reader at all. Like it's a
Yeah.
tough thing to do to someone, and yet you somehow manage to make it very readable. So I mean, I don't know how you do that. So let's talk to the emerging writers in the audience, because I'm sure there are like quite a few.
Yeah.
Um, so it took me 7 years to write my first novel.
Yeah.
It's too long, guys. Don't take 7 years. It's too long. But I did it because I was teaching myself how to write.
Yes.
Um, what's annoying about you is that your so-called difficult second novel turned out to be funny.
Yes.
So, like expletive deleted, at
Yes.
you.
Yes.
That's I can't bear you, really. Um, did you ever have that? I don't know if I can do it again.
Yeah, all the time. Every book is different.
Yeah, fair
So
enough. Yeah.
yeah, they're all different. So I know absolutely. It's always like a new challenge. It always feels like I'm starting to learn from scratch. But what I have learned from 13 Ways, which took me 6 years to write, but
Really,
really 14 if I count the first poem that I wrote that would become the book.
I
Um,
love that.
yeah, is to be patient with myself and to understand that failure is just an inherent part of the experience and not to be afraid of it and not to see it as some sign that I'm ultimately a failure. It's
Mm.
just part of writing is failing.
And there's this illusion that it's some kind of like, and there's some sort of standard and everybody's in the same race, but it is not true. We're all down our own rabbit holes,
Exactly.
suffering. Okay, so I like this one. So which fairy tale would you love to retell? I think it's I guess in a longer form. This is from Ash Kemp.
Which fairy tale? Well, I
Yeah.
feel like, my very, very
You've done
favorite.
a lot of it already in this book, but
Yeah, the Red Shoes and Snow White are both, but I don't know. I kind of want to revisit the Red Shoes. I feel like there's more there with the Red Shoes.
yeah, yeah, okay.
That might be Hans Christian Andersen's The Red Shoes, probably.
Goodness me. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Another comedy from Mona Awad. Um, um, so I like this. So how did you pick the title for your book? The word rouge has a lot of associations.
It does
Um,
a lot.
yeah, it's
Um,
the makeup, and it's also it's French for red. It's also the Scarlet Woman is inevitable.
yes,
Um,
yes.
and she's saying Baton Rouge in Louisiana. I hadn't thought about that.
Mm.
Moulin Rouge, yes, it's all true. That's from Janina Jarozelski.
Well, it's interesting. Red in fairy tales is usually some kind of a warning. It's both like a force of attraction,
Yeah.
but it's also a force potentially of spiritual corruption, as in the red shoes. And so red felt very important. And of course, it's a huge part of Snow White,
Yeah,
that black, white, and red
yeah,
color color story of Snow White.
that's right.
It is the color story of all folk tales, but especially of Snow White.
Yeah.
So red felt important, and rouge, because we put it on our face, it felt like it had that kind of resonance. And then I just
Yeah.
loved it. I mean, Sephora and rouge status, I felt like it was like a little wink to
Really? Oh,
those who know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Rouge and Sephora. So yeah, so that it is Sephora horror in some ways.
Sephora horror. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think you just invented a genre. I think pure Sephora horror. I loved is her last name is Noor, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Which is wonderful. Which is I suppose could sound like noir. It's just black,
Yeah,
but
that's
it's
right.
not. But it's not.
Ah,
It's
yeah.
light, isn't it? Noor.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely that's why I chose the name. I actually really think about the names quite a bit.
I think I think that's exactly right. I think it's inherent in such iconic kind of, archetypal writing that you have to. Everybody, everybody sort of represents themselves on the page in a way with their name. So she's got it says Belle, which is sort of slightly passive. Not
Yes.
passive, but it's there are associations on there, which is lovely. I think, I think it's a wonderful book. I hope all you rotters have bought it already, but if you haven't, um, there is, if you have bought it, I think it will take 8 to 10 days to arrive. So don't fret, it will arrive. Um, okay, will you leave us? Do you have do you have an iconic line? Not from necessarily a book, but from a movie. What's the line that's made its way into your heart that when you need to feel like a hero? That's what you say.
Oh my
I
goodness.
know, I put you on the spot. I'm so sorry.
No, 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 you're fine. I think that thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine and from the Tempest. Um,
Wow, you really rose to that challenge. Fantastic.
I think about that a lot. I love that line, and I feel like that's the truth for me. I'm always acknowledging the
That's incredible.
dark
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
I don't think wonderful. I don't know how to say how much I love the work. I'm sure that everyone watching loves it too, or is about to love it. And I think we're almost out of time. I'll do one more quick question, but I'm going to restrict you. You have to answer in 3 words or less.
Okay.
I mean, these questions are not structured for that at all. So it's really not a very fair thing to do to you, but let's see what happens.
Okay.
Okay, right. Okay. All right. So, I'm not going to ask you that. It's great. It's crazy. Okay. How time consuming is completing research for a novel and then fact checking? Because
Oh my gosh.
I'm so sorry, Mona. I'm so sorry.
It involves shopping.
It involves your perfect, amazing. You're brilliant at this. I don't know why I had any doubts at all. How long did it take you to finish Rouge?
5 months.
No word to spare. I'm gonna try
5 months
to.
for the first draft, I have to say, the first draft. So
Yeah, I know. The first draft is interesting, isn't it?
yeah.
It's
5
really
weeks actually for the first draft, and then
really wow, God. And did you feel? Did you show it to anyone?
oh yeah, I showed it to my partner
Okay, but not to your agent or editor yet.
a little later.
Yeah,
I showed it.
yeah. I can't. I always feel like the first draft is just
Yes.
yeah, it's just for you telling yourself the story.
Yes.
And I've often made the mistake of thinking that other people can understand the story from the first draft. They cannot. So you're much smarter than me. All right. I'm going to leave. I think we'll leave on a high note with So, what inspired you? What's your biggest inspiration? Your core inspiration for this book? What do you want people to take away from it?
Beauty is, I mean, do I have to say it in 3 words?
No, darling. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I release you. I release you. I'm sorry.
No, well, just that beauty is both, life and death. It is both. And yeah, I think that's what I would say.
I think it says that so eloquently. It's a privilege to read it. Thank you. All right. I think thank you so much for coming, everyone. You're brilliant. I'm so happy I was allowed to be here too. I think let's have a virtual hand for Mona Awad. Oh, look, they're doing it, the hearts. And I look forward to look forward to reading this book. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor, Catriona. I'm like such a huge fan already, and yeah, your questions were wonderful, and thank you all for your questions.
I hope I didn't put you through it too much.
Oh gosh.
But I mean, if I did, you rose to the challenge amazingly. I'm such a fan. And good night, everyone. Good night. Good luck.
Thank you.